Welcome back to Out of This World. We are blasting off with Thomas from Paranoid America. Welcome. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm always doing great when we can spread the message of Mormonism to the world.
Oh, yes. The message of our dear prophet Joseph Smith is what we're going to be talking about. No, we have not converted. We are just
Yeah.
fascinated by this religion of Mormonism. And I thought it would be fun to have you on because Mormons are having a moment right now.
Oh, that's right. You know what? You're absolutely right. Yeah. And let me just point out too that Mormonism for me is particularly fascinating because it's so uniquely American. There's not a lot of American religions that have the track record of Mormonism, at least, because we haven't been around long enough. So it's also one of these religions that we can watch evolve in real time, whereas every other religion, like established religion, it almost feels like you're going to history class and like all the rules are a done deal.
Mhm.
Mormonism, they're not. It's still cooking a little bit.
Yeah, and it's funny. It's a unique American religion, like you said, because you have this whole melting pot of Quakers, Shakers, Amish, Mennonite, Catholic, Protestant, Plymouth Brethren, root workers. You know, you have your folk magic all going on here in New England in the 1800s. And of course, this is going to spring out of that era. And it's just, I would consider Joseph Smith to be like one of these characters that would be like a character of the century. I mean, they just had, for good or bad, uh, their story is crazy, you know, and their personality and the things that they managed to get away with and accomplish and their legacy is just really fascinating. And no offense to Mormons tonight, I know some and they are nice and upright people. Um, but this is a very complex space religion. And it is very deep and it's so complex that you even do Mormon monthly, right?
Yeah, I got a show that I do with my longtime friend Heidi Love, who's an ex-Mormon, called Monthly Mormon Mondays. And I like to feel like I add a little bit of neutrality to the conversation and we kind of go deep into it. And what I've discovered is that the more I learn about Mormonism, the more I'm fascinated with it. Not repulsed. I don't like dislike it by any means. And sometimes I kind of joke that like maybe I'm on the fence. Maybe I could elicit Mormon membership at some point. Like I could be a candidate that they could potentially hunt down.
hmm Well, if you are into occult and magic, it definitely dovetails in because I read this entire paper, Joseph Smith and the Kabbalah, the Occult Connection by Lance S. Owens, and this was actually in a Mormon publication called Dialogue, a Journal of Mormon Thought. And so I'm going to go over this. This is in the member section, all of these things. I don't think we'll have time to get to that tonight, but Kabbalah, definitely Rosicrucian is another influence. Freemason is another influence, obviously. We're going to talk about another paper called The Beast and the Prophet, how Aleister Crowley was also fascinated with Joseph Smith. And I watched some Temple Endowment movies that we're gonna go over, and I want to ask you some questions because I know you probably know a lot more about this than I do. And what else do we have? Oh, this fun thing. Okay, so this goofy guy is Joseph Smith, according to Jack T. Chick. So if you grew up in the Protestant milieu, you would know that Chick tracts are these little tiny comic books, right, that you leave around and people pick them up. And I know you all have some merchandise that is based on these. So you took that idea of Chick tracts and you made some conspiracy tracks, right? Do you have any?
Here's one. I actually found one. This one's called
Yes.
"Are You Under Illuminati Mind Control?" And it's the format that you know and love, and it's got the artwork that kind of reflects the chick track. Although mine are in full color now.
Those are so
Oh, here you go.
awesome.
There's a Masonic ritual going on right
Yep.
there that we just opened up to.
There's your Temple Endowment right there. So yeah, it's this little comic is called The Enchanter, and he definitely was a um character of enchantment for sure. So I have not read this big old thick book that I got when I'm gonna have Heidi on myself, but that goes into his like background, his childhood, how they were like treasure seekers and tall tales, big fish type people. And I was chuckling because it's like you don't need the internet to be super gullible. I guess people have always just been like easy to fool and manipulate. And we're gonna find out Joseph Smith wasn't always on the up and up, right?
And we're no better today, I don't think. I
Yeah.
think that we've got fancier tools and technology, and we convince ourselves that we couldn't get as duped as easy as our great great grandparents. But I would almost argue the opposite.
Yeah. Yes. So yeah, Mormons are having a moment, and it's this whole trad wife movement. I'm sure you've heard of that, right? And spearheading this is two I can think of off the top of my head are Nara Smith and Ballerina Farms. Have you heard of those girls?
And I'm totally unaware of like the Mormon influencer world.
Okay. So, I mean, these are Mormon light. I mean, these are like neo-Mormons. Like my costume right now is the classic, prairie muffin, trad wife, right? Um, but these are the new Mormons. And so Nara, she's pretty much the preeminent supermodel, on TikTok right now. She is very young, under 25. She's got four babies already, but she's a supermodel, and her husband also is a supermodel named Lucky Smith. And I mean, beautiful family, beautiful aesthetic. No one can make me hate Nara, but it's not attainable for everybody. And I feel like a lot of people who want this lifestyle are not realizing, especially men, like she has a team of makeup artists. She has a team of people who help her nanny. She has like, because her TikTok is about like making food, making natural food from scratch and like, don't eat Cheerios because I'll make you my own healthy ones or whatever. So, and it's really beautiful. I like her channel, but a lot of people see this and they're like, oh, I'll never live up to that. And Ballerina Farm is another one where she's got almost 10 children now, and they live on this kind of farm. But her husband is a wealthy, his family was in the airlines industries. So they are projecting this back to the land lifestyle, but a lot of people don't realize that there are teams behind these people and this is a business and these women are actually business women, right? They're not just submissive, dumb, uh, like I said, prairie muffins that don't have any agency of their own. So there's this new Mormon archetype emerging from these types of accounts. What do you think?
You're almost describing like a super church wife or something, but you mix in a little bit of the homesteading angle. And if you ignore all the Crowleyan magic and the Freemasonry, like all the evil stuff, just ignore all the evil stuff for a second,
Hmm.
and the lifestyle that you're describing and sort of the values that apply in practical life that Mormons take out, it's kind of the same as the hardcore preppers and the hardcore conspiracy theorists, where it's like, hey, we should just go and found our own city and just like live by our own rules and help each other out if we're in need and pool our resources and
Hmm.
stock up on guns and like all of these things seem to be universally agreed upon. Like, yeah, that's what would bring this country back, to its prime. And then you're like, oh, I was describing the Mormons, and then people kind of like, skirt a little bit from away from that.
Yeah, and it's funny because he actually, Joseph Smith, tried to create some type of breakaway civilization of his own where he took over a town at one point called Nauvoo. It was called Commerce, I think, and then he got there with all of his followers and he became the mayor and the, grand poobah of the whole town, the priest, the king. He wanted to run for president at one point. He wanted to make Nauvoo a sovereign state and be the governor. So he had really lofty goals. He even built up his own private army at one point called the Danites. So correct me if I'm wrong about any of this, because
No,
I've
you're right on all that. And
okay.
another, I hope I don't get this part wrong, but I believe that on paper, in a technical sense, that Joseph Smith was the first presidential candidate to be assassinated in America as well.
Oh wow. Okay. Interesting. So yeah, he had Big Fish Life, right? Remember that movie by Tim Burton, and his stories were too fanciful to be believed, but at the end he was telling the truth about it all.
Yeah, I was gonna say at the end he was not lying. He actually
Right.
did catch this huge fish.
Yeah. So that's how I think of old Joseph Smith. Now, I did watch a couple episodes of The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives just to get a idea of what the nouveau Mormon lady is like. And it is nothing like what you would expect. So the one woman that this all revolves around, she actually started this thing called Mom Talk. So it was like moms on TikTok sharing recipes and dancing and fitness and beauty tips. And I didn't realize how much Mormons and Mom Talk had affected like the whole fashion aesthetic for the country from like 2020 on. Certainly some specific haircuts I can see came from Utah and Mormons, some styles. But this one lady, Taylor Frankie Paul was her name. She got in big trouble because, come to find out, the moms from Mom Talk, and especially her, were into swinging parties.
Mormon swinging parties?
Yes, and orgies. And just the three episodes I watched was I mean, this lady's like total succubus, okay? She does not have a grip on reality. She was divorced, she was dating, she got pregnant again out of wedlock. She is soft swinging, she's getting arrested for domestic violence, she's going to jail. I mean, all
She
of
sounds Catholic.
I mean, yeah, she was like a riot, but it's like this is crazy. And even her friends don't like her because she's like every time she comes around, she flirts with our husbands and crosses the line, and it's inappropriate. And I don't like her. But they're all together now on this show. They have to get along for the sake of Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, right? You got to get that Mormon paycheck.
Which is ironic because none of them's really secret about it now. They're all on TikTok. Like the whole live is sort of broadcast anyways.
Right. And one scene, they were going around talking about their brand deals that they get from TikTok and now this new show. And one of them was like for sex toys. So they're branching out, they're getting naughty, and, and they're,
It's
naughty.
it's like called the Super Soaker.
Oh, oh no, because that's what the kids do, right? Have you
I
heard
mean,
that?
I assume that that's the only acceptable Mormon sex toy.
I don't know exactly what they were. They were just like, looked like garden variety vibrators. But soaking, yeah, have you heard of that?
Apparently, it's not real, and it was
Oh, okay,
never a real
good.
workaround. I don't doubt that some teenage Mormon convinced another teenage Mormon that like this was a legit workaround. But as far
Uh,
as I can tell, it was never. There's another one too called bubbling that got big in like the 90s that
uh-huh.
they would do to like images where you would just draw a bubble around any part of skin showing and then color in any clothing showing and it like tricks the Mormon eye into thinking they're looking at something nude, I guess.
Oh, okay.
It's funny. It's even weirder and more suppressed than again like Catholic upbringing. Like Mormon
Mhm.
upbringing kind of brings it to a new weird level.
I love those things where they try and like trick God and get past things, that they think are wrong. It's really funny. Yeah,
Well, yeah,
so
somewhere God is just a lawyer somewhere, and he would be impressed that you were able to outmaneuver him
yes.
legally, right?
Yeah, you got me. Yeah. So it's kind of funny and wholesome what they find ultra scandalous in their mom group. And then I'm thinking of another show that came out on HBO like 10 years ago or 20 years ago called Big Love. Did you ever watch that?
Big Love with Jenny from Kids was in that, I believe.
Yes. Yeah. So that one actually had a scene where they do the part of the passing through the veil, if I remember correctly, because I was like, that looks so Masonic, and I didn't really know a lot about Mormonism at that time.
100%. And I mean, you can keep peeling it back a little bit. That I think that was one of the first overtly Mormon television shows. But if you look, one and another big one too was Battlestar Galactica. Battlestar Galactica was essentially a Mormon values retold as a sci-fi novel, both the newer remake from the 2000s, but also the classic version even more so.
Yeah, I wanted to get into that because I do know people who have watched are very big Battlestar Galactica fans. It never really roped me in, but I'm familiar with the idea of like creating Cylons and artificial people and the idea of like eternal recursion, like this has all happened before and it's going to happen again. And I even in that Mormon endowment movie that I watched, Lucifer is talking about that. He was like, "This is not the only world, and I've gone to other different worlds that have been seeded and given them the knowledge of good and evil as well." So, but before we talk about the endowment movie, I wanted to get into what you know about Disney and Mormon because that is a weird fusion of
It's
subjects,
so
right?
natural though. It
Yeah.
really is natural and it makes sense for so many reasons.
Hmm.
And what's going to be even crazier is how many Mormons were involved in the core foundation of Disney classics from the 1930s into the 1950s and 60s. That pretty much all the major blockbuster movies that are still earworms right now in your ear came from Mormons. The animation came from Mormons, the character design, the music. And in fact, the endowment ceremony from 1955 to 1990, so about 35 years, featured a 3-minute clip from Fantasia that was just lifted right out of the Disney movie and put into the endowment ceremony because this was when they opened their very first international temple. I think it was in Switzerland. And the challenge was that up until now, the endowment ceremony was acted out live and it had to be memorized, very Masonic. It was
Hmm.
basically like a Masonic ritual. But
Hmm.
now, if you got a whole bunch of different people all across Europe coming together to have to repeat this thing, they realized that it wouldn't be scalable. So let's make a movie out of it. And
Hmm.
who's better at making movies than Disney? So they kind of just grabbed this little clip and then they added it. But when they recorded that, they actually had someone dress up as Lucifer in the Salt Lake City top level. They brought in trees through the windows and they set up this entire artificial Garden of Eden inside the Salt Lake City temple and filmed anything that wasn't basically used by Disney.
Hmm.
So the Disney angle is cra so here's why it makes sense, right? There's some popular like Mormon mentality that if it's not good for your kids, then it's not good for you either. And that sort of limits the joke is that it limits you to like Disney and Hallmark
Hmm.
doesn't have a theme park. So it really
Right.
just kind of means that Disney is the default safe content that anyone can sort of watch unless you get into it and you're like, no, Disney is also satanic and Masonic and everything else. And then, but that's not the mainstream by far, right? Especially not now. So it's G to PG rated, so it's kind of automatically friendly. There's the critical side of like ex-Mormonism would say that Disney caters to this like infantile mindset of good guy, bad guy, very simple rule sets, a little bit less depth and complexity. That's sort of like a derogatory jab at any religion, Mormonism included. But
Hmm.
it kind of touches on a point too, though, that Disney movies are somewhat formulaic and large portions of like Mormon culture and beliefs are also formulaic, good or bad, but it follows like this very specific script. Another example is that one of Disney's 9 old men, like the OGs of Disney,
Hmm.
his name was Eric Larson. He was LDS.
Okay.
Don Bluth, who was fundamental in a lot of the early Disney movies, in Robin Hood, The Dark Cauldron, believe it or not, is pretty Mormon sort of movie. And then when he branched off and started doing his own thing, A Land Before Time, and Space Ace and Dragon's Lair, like Don Bluth was a Mormon his entire life. He
Mm.
wasn't like a late convert or anything. One thing to keep in mind is that the entire Mormon population of the US, even now after growth, is only like 2% of the population. It's another group of like small niche of religious people that have like a lot of power over certain perceptions. So the LDS Church has been inside of the Disney Corporation since its very founding. I got a couple other names here. Floyd Gottfredson, he was one of the earliest. He was hired in like 1929 to work for Disney, and I
Hmm.
believe he originally wanted to work on comic strips, and then he got moved over to doing animation, and then he bounced back into doing comic strips, where he then worked on all the Mickey Mouse comic strips until like the mid 1950s.
Hmm.
So that was the one guy that probably shaped what we see as Mickey Mouse more than anybody, and he was a Mormon, a guy named Les Clark. He ended up becoming a longtime Disney lifer. There was a guy named Lee Hairline that made Pinocchio, essentially. It's known as his personal masterpiece. So Mormons behind Pinocchio. Ward Kimball was also one of the nine old men.
Uh-huh.
Judge Whittaker was one of the
Oh, Ward
OG.
Kimball was Mormon also?
Ward Kimball was also Mormon. Yeah, he's the one
Wow.
that
Uh-huh.
supervised animation of Pinocchio and Jiminy Cricket. He
Yeah.
was kind of like in charge of all the Jiminy Cricket animation. So he was also, there was another, the Disney's personal driver at the time, Leroy Beach, was also a Mormon. It
Hmm.
keeps going. Judge Whittaker, Eric Larson, Don Bluth, a guy named Richie Rich, Richard Rich, who ends up
Okay.
doing Winnie the Pooh, Tiger 2, Peach Dragon, The Rescuers, The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. So anyone that's seen any of these, if you've seen Pinocchio, if you've seen Snow White, if you've seen Cinderella, if you've seen Fantasia, then you've basically been watching the products of Mormon animators, Mormon concept designers, like the in-betweeners that do the frames in between,
Hmm.
and the music itself, all composed by Mormons. And again, for such a small portion of people, part of this was because in the 1920s and then into 1930s, the Great Depression started forcing a lot of people in that region, in like the northwest region of the US, to sort of look outside of just manufacturing jobs and grunt work and blue collar. They start looking into doing white collar. So you get this huge surge of a bunch of Mormon animators and writers and musicians all swarming and moving left into California and
Hmm.
just straight up working for Disney. And I think for the same reason that Howard Hunt hired Mormons to be like his bodyguards and help him run Vegas, is like he could trust them to be on time, trust them not to cheat him out of a day's work, not to show up drunk, not to gamble, like not to
Hmm.
have all these vices that you'd have to worry about your workers. And it was just like, hey, you're Mormon and you're talented and you want to work for me, Disney? Like, sure, I'll pay you like $50 less a week than you're already making. Come on over. And that
Right.
it worked for 50 years.
Wow. Yeah, you're so right about that. The Mormon ethos of like sobriety is very good and honesty and the missions work. And I can see these people are very sincere about, you know, living oh, something, my light just went out. This wholesome lifestyle, right? And that is attracts converts. Um, but their cosmology is very weird. And Joseph Smith, the character, obviously, well, let's just get into it. So, like I said, he was, a young guy, and his father also was this type of like character who liked to tell tales and treasure seek. And here in this chick comic, it said that Joseph always wore this silver talisman. Can you see
Yeah,
that?
the Jupiter talisman,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So there is ritual magic going on, and I do want to say some points from this Beast and the Prophet paper, but the Tale of the Golden Plates is just kind of, what would you say?
Fantastical is a
Yeah.
very appropriate word. I think that it represents so many of the same archetypes of other founders of religions, that they have some divine presence before them that gives them some kind of a message that they can't properly translate elsewhere, that
Hmm.
they have some sort of a supernatural device that reveals ancient text or ancient rules or something to them. Like
Hmm.
all you can overlay this on almost any other world religion, Christianity and Judaism included, and find like there a lot of different analogs between these two things. The other thing too is that he used Urim and Thummim, these like who knows what they are. They're described as bifocals or glasses, but I've seen so many different interpretations of what these could have been. It could have been like prisms that you aligned and a bent light. Like who knows what all these different little things could have been.
Uh-huh.
But like the at the core of it is great storytelling, I think, and you
Hmm.
can't really have any religion without a good story and with a lot of zealots. That is the only two things that'll let you start a religion and actually get it past the first 100 years.
I mean, his attitude was so, like you said, zealous that it almost makes you wonder, does he have like schizophrenia? Because there's also these correlations between, like, let's say Iwas contacting Aleister Crowley or Lom or somebody like that, and the angel contacting Joseph Smith. What was his Moroni?
Yeah, Moroni.
Um, so there's a lot of parallels with that. Also, the plural marriage part is funny to me because Jay and I did a show maybe like 5 or 6 years ago, just like outlining about cults and like what all the cults have in common. And one of the first ones was like, all your women belong to us, or the cult leader, right?
Well, yeah, it's not a cult unless it's a sex cult.
Yeah, and basically it was. Okay, so what we are finding out is that he took a lot of Kabbalistic ideas, Rosicrucian ideas, Masonic ideas, Hermetic even, and sprinkled in some of your great American grit and created this new religion and also, like I said, a breakaway type civilization or a utopian, Baconian idea that we can all like live, communally and share wives. And then at the end, we are going to go to heaven and have space babies, and you can like have celestial marriages. I didn't even get into like, there's like the terrestrial kingdom, the telestial kingdom, and the celestial kingdom,
Yeah,
right?
there's actually funny enough, the Disney movie Soul
Uh,
was maybe unintentionally one of the most Mormon movies ever, and one of the reasons is because in the movie Soul, which is about the jazz musician that dies, I don't know
mhm.
if you've seen it
Huh.
or how long ago you've seen it. So in the movie Soul, it actually shows these three different kingdoms, and I guess an easier way to think about the three to oversimplify them is you've got pre-life and then life, and then afterlife, and that these are three distinct phases. And I guess in some interpretations of Mormonism, which are no longer canon, I don't know when they changed it, but those were like technically three different planets or three different universes or three different dimensions that
Okay.
you kind of hop between. So like it's pre-life, life, and then afterlife. And that's
Okay.
a gross oversimplification, but it's the easiest way to think about it.
Well, also, I mean, just looking at it historically, most cults of antiquity were concerned with fertility and putting their posterity into the future, just like Joseph Smith. And it's funny because whenever you talk about space babies, then you're getting into like weird cult activity. And I mean, Jay had a lady on who was an ex-Mormon. They did some exposés about cult like satanic cults that are hidden within the Mormon enclaves, like the FLDS Church, obviously Warren Jeffs, and those you get very crazy abuse going on, with the isolation out there, right?
Yeah, and I want to layer three other things on top of this too. So,
Okay.
Mormonism, like you said, I think it's a great explanation. It's like this old European occultism
Uh-huh.
mixed with just like regular cults, mixed with American grit. But then you get three really cool things on top of that. You get cowboys, pirates, and sci-fi. And
Yes.
like I'm not even making any of that up, right? Like the sci-fi angle, because Joseph Smith was literally talking about Quakers living on the moon, like an
Hmm.
alien race of people living on the moon, and that some of the earlier versions of canon were that when you died, you got to go to Kolob or you got your own planet. So like there's a heavy sci-fi aspect, and there's really no other. When I say branch of Christianity, maybe some people are like, I don't agree with that, but a branch of Christianity that was created after space travel, or at least like up until leading into like space travel being a thing and a
Hmm.
thought in people's minds. So it's so modern. It's also got cowboy roots because up until the 19 like 30s maybe, Mormons were not necessarily all clean cut. If you look at a list of all the different LDS presidents over time, you can see an exact moment where they no longer have beards and they all go clean cut.
Hmm.
And I recommend bringing that up with Heidi because she knows all the different names and dates when like the Skull and Bones influence came in, and they were like, "Hey, we need to clean up our image. And it was a very concerted effort that now when you think Mormon, you think two kids on bikes, clean shaven with white shirts tucked in, and that like they wouldn't say anything offensive, but classic Mormons, the ones that killed Joseph Smith essentially,
Hmm.
and like the Brigham Youngs, like these were frontiersmen cowboys that were literally dressing up as Indians and just like massacring
Yes.
hundreds of people essentially. And they fought and won against the US military on a number of occasions. Some of those basically by default because the US military just straight up didn't show up or didn't have the firepower.
Hmm.
But they started as straight up cowboys. And then I would say the pirate angle is just as legit because the very foundation of Joseph Smith was traveling the world and traveling to different countries and in different areas of the US and looking for buried treasure and looking for old skeletons. Like that, there's nothing more pirate about that. I mean, he didn't command a ship, but I think that those three things work really well for Mormonism.
Right. And not only was he like doing his pirate thing, he was also guided by these spirits. So this comic book tells the story of when he was finding the golden plates. The spirit took it back into the earth when he set it down and said, you have to come back in 1 year and bring your brother. But his brother had died in the meantime. And then, so I don't know how historically accurate this chick comic book is, but it said he had to go dig up his brother and take a part of his body to the spirit to give him back the box with the golden plates in it, which were invisible to only to those who had like the faith could see these golden plates. What did you hear that story?
Yeah, and this is a recurring theme too about the necromancy
Hmm.
angle. That some of the old relics of like old Mormon canes of some of the old presidents, I believe, that they were said to have fragments of bones of previous prophets within the LDS Church. And this was a very taboo thing that I don't think would have been publicized by any sort of official channels, but it has persisted for over 100 years that all these old prophets and these old men from the church were actually carrying around bones of their predecessors.
That's so crazy. I mean, we do have relics, so there is some kind of precedent for that in like ancient religion. So there's yeah, lot going
Well, and
on.
and I wanted
Mhm.
to point out too that the Jupiter talisman, I believe that's a high point of contention. And there was
Mhm.
also a bloodstone talisman that Brigham Young was apparently had as well. It's also been a point of contention. There's Mormon sources that say that it was absolutely his, but modern Mormon sources will be like, it's shaky. But here's the other thing that those original talismans were supposed to be kept towards the body, facing inward, so it's
Mhm.
touching your skin. The actual talisman was,
Mhm.
and this was the original premise of the funny magic Mormon underwear. That the
Oh.
Mormon underwear literally has a three different symbols from Freemasonry that are put inside the fabric that face towards the skin, and that you wouldn't even see it if you didn't know to look for them. And in fact, a lot of Mormons that wear the undergarments don't even might not even realize why they're wearing it or what makes them magic or special. And it's literally Freemasonic talismans that have to touch your skin all the time.
Wow. Well, speaking of Masons, Captain Morgan uh, shows up in this story, and I'm sure you know that tale about him writing that anti-Masonic book and giving away the secrets, and he was killed for that, right?
Yeah, he was found dead, and the way that he died is supposed to have mirrored the blood oaths that Masons make that say they'll never divulge the secrets.
Hmm.
So it that was basically them putting him on display. It's like a Mexican cartel
Yeah.
showing the rest of the world like don't mess with us.
Yeah.
And you said it's even in that comic book, but his wife ends up William Morgan's wife, the most famous anti-Freemason in American history. His wife goes on to then become one of Joseph Smith's wives. So there's a direct connection between Freemasonry, not just from Joseph Smith himself being a Freemason and then incorporating that into the religion, but being tied to the anti-Masonic movement. And I mean, I would make a strong argument, I think, that without William Morgan's death and without the anti-Masonic movement that sprung out of that, we don't even really have like a Republican Party. That's kind of where
Hmm,
Republicans came from.
interesting. Oh, can
Because
you?
I believe the anti-Masonic Party eventually evolved and assimilated into the Whig Party, and then the Whig Party forms the part of the foundation of like what you would consider Republican conservatives. It may be unrecognizable now versus when the Whigs went out, but that the anti-Masonic Party is what set in motion what is now one of the main two options politically in the United States. And you wouldn't get the anti-Masonic Party, at least not at its same fever pitch, without the Morgan affair.
Oh, that's crazy. I didn't know that. Good point. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, he did. He married Captain Morgan's widow. He's sort of like a L. Ron Hubbard type. Because
100%. What a great
yeah,
analogy. Yeah.
because he's
Another guy
absorbing
that founded an American religion based on sci-fi.
right, and space babies and yeah. Um so he's absorbing like stories and legends and books from other authors and making them his own. He's giving these revelations. Like I said, he built his own army. Um One day, Joseph Smith got big mad when he thought he was being persecuted too much, and he says he will be like a second Muhammad to this generation. So there's another kind of like correlation to a religion. Like I said, the plural wives, the afterlife is very similar, and he, well, this chick track says that he was like modeling some certain things. It says in 1842, John Bennett said that Joseph's master and model was Muhammad.
I mean, I believe that to some extent because I think
Mhm.
he drew when he's creating his religion, one of the other, I mean, that is the other newest religion he had to look back on.
Mhm.
If you were creating a religion in the early 1700s, the best frame of reference would probably be Islam because that was the next, newest thing going around. So
Mhm.
it would make a perfect model for that to be your example, especially since so many other Christian denominations had made these correlations between Jesus constantly and like other typical messiahs. And like Joseph Smith was not afraid to invoke other weird stuff. And that was kind of what made him a problem for the church itself. Like once it became established, you had, and again, look, if you were to take a picture of every single prophet of the church and lined them up, it's like, all right, here's this young 20, 30 something Joseph Smith, and then all 70-year-olds forever and ever until today, right? So
Yeah.
he creates this religion, and the old guys show up, and it's like, hey, Joseph, a nice little religion you got here. We're gonna need you to leave. Like
Mhm.
what you're saying now, it's a little bit untenable for us to maintain this long term. So he became a problem.
Well, where it starts to unravel, it seems like, is his taking of these celestial wives in secret. I mean, we talk about Muhammad and his, what, 9-year-old wife. And Joseph had a 14-year-old wife when he was 38. We don't really know how many total celestial marriages he did because he would just corner these girls and do it in secret. And even one sister wouldn't know that the other sister is also his wife. You know what I mean? Like that's how secretive he was about
This is like how the
relationship.
Illuminati recruited members, where they'd
Yes.
recruit like brothers, and the brothers weren't allowed to tell, so they wouldn't even know.
No, for real. And so it's like Mormon heaven is a bunch of babes, just like
You show up in your Mormon
Monica.
planet, and you're like, Joe, who are all these other women? And he's like, oh yeah, I was doing like some secret celestial stuff. Don't worry about it.
Exactly. And so it's turning into this polygamy cult with this, he's promising them salvation, right? If they capitulate to his proposal of marriage. And at this time, he's super powerful, right? And he's got his town of Nauvoo. He's like got these ambitions for president. He's marrying all these girls in secret. He's telling them that an angel will kill him if he didn't practice polygamy, and he's trying to get his wife, his first wife, Emma, on board with this like plural marriage idea, and she kept saying no, 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 until he made up the endowment ceremony and told her that he would not let her participate unless he could have the other wives. And she's like, okay, but I get to pick. And he's like, okay, pick. And she picked these two sisters that he had already had. Have you heard this story?
No, this is a new one for me.
Oh, and so he has to marry them again in a public ceremony when he had already had them in private, like in the past. So,
This is you find out about your surprise party, but you have to kind of like act like it's a
yeah,
surprise anyways.
exactly. And so I watched this whole thing about the diaries of his young wives or whatever, and it was pretty grim. I don't think they were really vibing with Joseph. I think they were just kind of scared, and the whole town almost was Mormons, and he was like the prophet, so they pretty much had to do what he said. And where it starts to unravel is he's doing these loyalty tests. Like he calls this one guy and he's like, God said that you need to give me your wife, and you have 24 hours to turn her over to me. And so he finally brings her, and Joseph's like, just kidding. That was a loyalty test, but I do want your 14-year-old daughter. So this is when the other pillars of the community and church fathers are like, we need to get rid of this crazy guy because he had been giving them these old occult secrets. So I even want to, I didn't bring the book with me, but like the Hieros Gamos ceremony, you know what that is, from Rosicrucians, and it goes back to Inanna and Dumuzi, the sacred marriage, the mystical marriage, right?
And keep going.
Well, these are the ideas that he is like giving to his close men in secret, the ideas of Kabbalah and the union and sacred sex and like just like chivalry and the romanticism of like Christian Rosencrantz and sacred marriage, basically, and making it very, I mean, I'm sure this was all very mystical and sexy in like 1840, right?
Well, and especially because he was supposed to have been this illiterate bumpkin, this illiterate country bumpkin that was just digging in the dirt, and then all of a sudden had all these revelations. And I mean, this is complete speculation on my part, but it seems like maybe Joseph would want to lean into that a little bit. Because if you could lean into like, oh yeah, I don't even know how to read, and now I'm getting all these prophecies dictated to me by these angelic and celestial beings, it adds a little bit more credibility. It's almost like if you started just randomly speaking in German, and I knew
Hmm.
for a fact that you didn't know how to speak German, it's impressive. But if I knew that you've been speaking it your whole life, then it's not impressive. It's like a parlor trick at that point. And there were some aspects of early Joseph Smith that seem undeniably like parlor tricks, where he would find a thing or bury a thing and then lead people back to it and pretend that he found it for the first time. There was like an old skeleton that I think he found later on in his life that was supposed to be like this white Native American Lamanite. His name started with a Z or something, but he basically would like find things and bring people to him and like play into this idea that he was actually divining where items were located. And in even the original seer stones that he used to start the whole religion weren't even his seer stones. They were from like his neighbor, like the girl that lived next door, and she
Yeah.
had a seer stone, and she would go around and be like, "Oh, I found this and that," and he was like, "Hey, can I borrow that?" And then he just never gave it back. So like the whole religion was found on a seer stone that he took from the neighbor next door and never even returned. And it's kind of a perfect example of everything that he did. He was kind of borrowing other people's magic and then repackaging it in a way that he could scale it. He was sort of a Walt Disney.
Mm. Oh, and that reminded me too, mentioning Walt Disney. So when I watched the endowment ceremony, like you said, part of it is recorded, part of it is a movie, and part of it is the ritual initiation that you take part in by doing the hand signs and everything. But it reminded me of something like Hall of Presidents or the Carousel of Progress, where it's like the voice narrating, and then they show you
Very
the screen.
carousel of progress because
Yeah.
because again before the modern one that we've got, it was all acted out. And then for about 35 years up until the 90s, it was this like pre-recorded thing that was made in 1955, which is right around, or at least within a decade of when like the Hall of Progress kind of came together. So it might have been made by like people that work in the same like office building, literally.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, yeah, let's talk about the endowment ceremony itself because these were kind of funny. What did I have? Oh, so just wrapping up old Joseph Smith character. So he's going telling everybody that God wants him to have all these wives. He calls this teaching the principle. So if you come across that in reading like Mormon writings, the principle is this sacred marriage of the plurality wives.
And you have to do it. This wasn't just like a nice thing and that you were allowed to do. You had to have, I can't remember if it was 3 or 4 wives. You had to have like a minimum number of wives in
Uh-huh.
order to even get into the club in the afterlife.
Oh, so there's like degrees.
A
Uh,
hundred, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I mean, the earliest teachings, which I think have been retconned for the most part, but the
Uh-huh.
polygamous teachings, it wasn't like a bonus feature. It was a core tenet that you had to abide by.
That makes sense. With like the hair idea of harems and then, your planet of wives. And he would even send husbands away on missions. Like this is where the missions started. So if he had his eye on some
You're going to
nice,
South Africa.
yeah,
Congratulations.
he's like, this 1800s babe looks good. Her husband needs to, yeah, go on a Mormon mission and get away from me so I can
Guess who's going to
proclaim.
Hawaii?
Yep. Oh, Haiti needs a Mormon missionary. Yay. So, if you were lucky enough to end up in the Temple Endowment Ceremony, let's see, the first thing I noticed that is they receive a new name. They say in connection with this company. So, that's a weird way to put it.
And from what I understand, that name's never really used again afterwards,
Hmm.
and it's up to you to remember what your secret code name essentially is.
Hmm.
But with how persistent and retentive the Mormons are with keeping documentation, I wouldn't doubt that they've got like an official list somewhere where it's like, all right, we called, Jamie like whatever Inanna or something. Like that's
Yeah,
gonna be
yeah.
her new name.
Well, we do that. I mean, in Orthodoxy, you take on a saint name and then they call you that at church or when you're taking communion. So you could also call me Anastasia or Jamie. So I just thought that was an interesting thing that he may have t taken from, classic in Rome when people would convert because lo lots of people in, Greece and Rome were named after pagan gods. So
Well,
my, right.
it's funny that you mention Rome too, because Joseph Smith ends up dying in Carthage, which is
Yep.
where Rome claims to have defeated paganism once and for all and driven it underground forever.
Oh yeah, and Carthage was a serious hub of child sacrifice too.
Well, it was the last remaining place that they could do it state sanctioned above ground in public, and then that's
Hmm.
the main reason that I think Rome basically said that like Carthage must be destroyed, and they just eliminated every remnant of it. It was the
Hmm.
last place that those old Phoenician child sacrifices and public orgies and all that were being done at the state level. Although I'd argue that Rome just made it for the elites and the military only. They didn't actually get rid of it, but that's another show.
Right. Yeah, so lots of weird synchronicities. Do you know what Nauvoo is? Like, how did he come up with the name for that town, Nauvoo?
That's a good question. I don't know where he get all these names from.
Okay.
Nauvoo was going to
It's very
be
Star
the
Wars.
original town, and then Zion was
Yeah.
essentially like where they were eventually trying to build this whole world for themselves in the terrestrial realm, right?
Hmm.
Would have been basically Zion, with Nauvoo being like one of the early foundations of all of that.
So in this endowment ceremony is there's like a model couple that goes through the things. on the stage, and then everybody else is emulating them in the audience. And it didn't look like super huge. It looked like maybe 50 people or something at a time. And they are, at the end, they're passing through the veil into the celestial room. And they say that kings and priests who rule and reign, and queens and priestesses. And what they are doing is getting this garment of the holy priesthood, and also the keywords, signs, and tokens you must show to the angels to get into heaven.
Yeah, it's essentially just a Masonic ritual. Like this part of you have to know the right code words and the right hand shakes and hand signals in order to advance. This is lifted just directly out of not just Masonry and Rosicrucianism, but this was like all ancient mystery schools had
Mhm.
some equivalent to this.
Hmm.
So, and one of the ways that I like to think about the way that Joseph Smith put all this together, it was kind of like he was just making a really awesome mixtape. It's not
I
like
guess.
he was a straight plagiarist and he's just like ripping people's ideas and playing it off as something. It's not like anyone thinks now that's what I call music is
Mm.
a band that was trying to pass off those songs as their own. It was just like, hey, here's a really good mixtape that you might like. And I think that that's kind of what he was doing.
That's a perfect way to put it too. And that's exactly what this big paper is talking about. Taking all these bits and pieces from uh medieval magic. So in the endowment movie, the Trinity is weird. So the Trinity of creators is Elohim, Jehovah, and Michael, right?
Well, the Trinity's already a little bit weird, right?
Yeah.
Regardless of what kind of Trinitarian you even are.
Yeah. So Elohim, Jehovah, and Michael, and they
This
show
is
that,
one of the biggest criticisms that sometimes like a non-Mormons or ex-Mormons that are usually like born again ex-Mormons
uh-huh.
is that there's a shockingly small emphasis from the outside looking in on Jesus within Mormonism. Like you just said, like the Trinity doesn't even really mention like any of the normal Trinity or Jesus. It's
Right.
mentioning Elohim and it's yeah.
And later on, they're visited by like Peter, Paul, and James or something like that. I'm like, these people haven't even been born yet, because they're visiting Adam and Eve. So yeah, we'll get there. So they, like you said, they show the 6 days of creation or the 7 days of creation, and it's super like drawn out and long and boring. And I could see why they would use Disney for this part because it's very nice animation, at least for the beginning of the world. And as soon as Adam and Eve are created, Lucifer comes and he starts talking about a new world and an old world, right? So, like, that's the idea of Battlestar Galactica. We've done this all before, we're doing it again. The Trinity is not God, they are just creators. Does that make
Which
sense?
sound kind of like Watchers a little bit.
Yes. So,
Which would make sense that Joseph Smith was probably a bigger fan of the Apocrypha than he was of like any of the canon, anything that made out of like the Council of Nicaea.
mhm. So it's getting a little Gnostic, and then it's funny because Adam declines the fruit first, and
Like a good boy.
yeah, no, they totally paint Eve as like this bitch that ruined everything, and Adam was like, no, no. But that's not really what we're taught in Orthodox class, and really the Bible does not say anything like that. It says actually Adam is more culpable because he sinned willingly and Eve was deceived. But so he he declines the fruit at first. He tells Eve that, or Lucifer tells Eve he has her brother trying to restore balance between good and evil.
Yeah, they essentially reenact being kicked out of the Garden of Eden,
Uh-huh.
which becomes, I think this is probably one of the main places where it diverges from the rest of conventional, like New and or even Old Testament. Like once they get kicked out of the Garden of Eden, that's when the rest of it becomes almost exclusively Mormon.
Hmm. And Lucifer wears an apron and an emblem of his power and priesthood. So Adam is naked and he's like, "Why are you wearing clothes?" And he's like, "This is my power." So at this point, they pause it and they say, "Put on your aprons." And do you know anything about that?
So yeah, so there's actually a really old comic strip that details all this, and it shows the devil wearing the apron. It shows people wearing the aprons, and I
Uh-huh.
believe there was even some versions where there's like light aprons and dark aprons, again, which is heavily Masonic. And
Hmm.
if you pull from Manly Palmer Hall's writings on this, before he became a Mason, he had this claim that even the Masonic apron that Joseph Smith is clearly lifting here that was an old Egyptian ritual, and it was essentially to just cover up the reproductive organs because that was seen as like this non-divine, or at least it was so divine that it had to be protected from the outside world. And that this is also why it would be white sheepskin aprons originally, is
Hmm.
because the color and the material, they all represented this kind of form of virginity, like this pre getting kicked out of Eden sort of lifestyle.
Hmm. And another apron that they put on is a green leaf one. So I guess that is supposed to symbolize the clothes that Adam made to hide from God after he had fallen, right?
Yeah, these were like the fashion clothing when they first, yeah, it represents the leaf essentially.
Okay.
But it's all Masonic. Like at the second the devil
Yeah.
shows up, he's like everyone's putting on aprons of some color.
Yes. And they're like, now put on your apron just like Lucifer. And I'm like, what's going on right now?
Yeah, I mean I couldn't fathom because I was raised Roman Catholic. I couldn't imagine someone ever like cosplaying as Satan in the middle of a service. It
Right?
blows my mind. Like who let this guy in here?
Yeah. So yeah, and then Lucifer, he gets all mad at God and he says that he does this in other worlds. Excuse me. And he will take the spirits that follow him and make them possess human bodies. So here we've got some thetans going on, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would not be surprised because the same way that Crowley was inspired by Joseph Smith and L. Ron Hubbard is inspired by Crowley, so by
Hmm.
proxy, L. Ron Hubbard is inspired by Joseph Smith, even if
Yeah.
it's not documented anywhere. 100%. Like that's just it's a 200-year newer version of Mormonism, essentially.
Isn't that crazy how this stuff all like zips together?
I don't know. I mean, maybe, but not really. Because if you even look at, like, we were talking about Carthage, right? And
Hmm.
Carthage wouldn't have existed without the Phoenician Empire, and the Phoenician Empire wouldn't have existed without Canaan, and Canaan wouldn't have existed without Babylonians. So,
Hmm.
like, there's just this constant assimilation and syncretism that's always happening. And again, this is why I think Mormonism is so fascinating. And I guess Scientology by proxy too, is that you can see the syncretism and the assimilation happening in real time, or the closest to real time we're ever going to get.
Yeah.
Where, like, for example, the Mormon Church, I think Nelson, the guy that just died, that was the president of the church,
Hmm.
I believe that he's the one that reintroduced the hat. This is what Heidi says, is that growing up in the 80s and 90s, you weren't allowed to talk about the hat. There was no magic hat. That was something that non-Mormons would say to make fun of Mormons. And then all of a sudden, he brings the hat out of the archives, and the Mormon church is like, "No, what are you talking about? The hat's always been part of this. Of course, there's a hat. There's always been a magic hat."
Hmm.
So, like, being able to see this happen in real time, it's almost like being able to watch papal decrees being like pumped out because like the
Hmm.
popes now, if they are doing papal decrees, it's not to the same level as their predecessors from centuries ago, where like a papal decree meant something, and when like a new law hit the books, it was fairly uncommon, or it represented some like warfare going on elsewhere. But in the Mormon Church, every few years they kind of get back together and they can reevaluate like what's canon and what's not, what isn't canon, and that flexibility seems to be like a core component of any new religion that springs up. It's you're gonna have to be flexible. Like we got the internet now.
Well, this paper points out, this is a very revolutionary religion and also open to new revelations and interpretations. So it's an ever evolving thing, just like a Gnostic cult would have been, right?
And especially since the founder was killed because the rest of the people were like, "Hey, we like the religion you created, but we don't like you, and we don't
Yeah.
want you influencing any more of this. And by the way, no more talking to angels and like hearing new instructions, no more golden plates, none of that. Like we got enough of the magic DNA to work with. Like we're
Mhm.
done with you now. Bang bang, or push him out the window. Whatever happened.
Well, this gets really dark too because this could fall into, wicked people's hands and they can use it to manipulate people. So as when I have been reading about Mormons and talking about it, of course, Mormon stuff would pop up on my TikTok. And like these women who have escaped these ultra fundamental cults, like the isolation cults, like we were talking about. Um, the patriarch would just like wake up one day and be like, God told me to round up all of these kids and take them to an undisclosed location and you'll never see them again. And he's like, what is going on? There's a very sinister undercurrent, I think. And there was a couple of TV shows about this, one with Andrew Garfield. I can't remember what it's called, but if you Google Mormon show Andrew Garfield, there was some like child TRAFF going on in the backwoods of these Mormon cults. Um, and like I said, Chiller Queen and Jay did a bunch of shows about this a couple years ago. Where was I going with that? Oh,
Was it
Revelations. Yeah. So
was
God told me.
I want to mention too, there was the Vice documentary too that came out maybe 15 years ago about the Romney clan, that when Mitt Romney was running for president,
Yeah.
that he had this whole other branch of his family that essentially were operating, doing illegal things, and they just went to Mexico so they could continue doing that. And that's also a whole other branch of like what you're describing. A lot of it still takes place, just they just left the states because they didn't want to deal with state prosecution by the United States. They'd rather deal with that in Mexico.
Hmm. And they've always been running away from the US government. I think over taxes was one of the main reasons that they were trying to go to Utah, also being hunted by the ex-Mormons in the town. But yeah, they've been at odds with the United States government for since the beginning, but also having ties to the underworld with them. But that's another show. So aprons, um, the couple kneels at the altar and they put their right arm at the square. So, like you said, this is just like ripped off masonry. And they give him the first token of the Aaronic priesthood. And it's just the first passcript of the entered apprentice, it looked like to me.
Essentially, yeah, yeah. It's he's following the exact same thing, and it's in the endowment ceremony. They also have past grips and real grips, meaning like the one that you would do in public or the one
Mhm.
that you would do both knowing that you're going to do a fake one so someone wouldn't see the real one, and
Uh-huh.
then the actual secret one that happens where no one else can see it, so that
Oh.
you can verify that someone has actually gone through the real endowment ceremony or gone through the actual entered apprentice degree or any other degree.
Hmm. So after they learn these tokens and signs, they turn the movie back on, and it's God saying, "Well, I'm out of here because you sinned, but I will give you these tokens and passwords for when I come back or I send emissaries back. You will know that they're from me by these certain signs and passwords, right?"
God didn't realize the internet was going to happen, I guess.
Yeah. And so Lucifer's always lurking around. And there's this whole scene about how Peter, James, and John come to Adam and ask Adam if he has sold his passcripts and secrets for money. And he's like, "No, I haven't sold them." So that's like some kind of morality test that he has passed.
Well,
Uh,
like Morgan, that's essentially what
hmm.
Morgan was accused of,
Hmm.
of selling it for money, but in this case it was to publish a book and then sell the book and make money off it.
Oh, yeah, good point. And then they have these new commandments, and it's like this long list of uh, reasonable things. And then one of them was avoid loud laughter. And they,
There's a
what
lot
was
of
that?
so this is another interesting thing with the early Mormon church, and I believe one of these came from like Emma.
Mhm.
Like there's the joke of that Mormons aren't allowed to drink coffee or they're not allowed to drink tea or caffeine or anything. I believe that originally this stemmed from hot drinks, that you're not allowed to have a hot drink.
Uh-huh.
And I believe it was like no chewing tobacco or something.
Hmm.
And you can trace both of those laws that are still part of kind of like Mormon canon today. I think you can trace them both to Emma because she was so annoyed of all the guys that would come over and they'd be like spitting tobacco like all over the house and like missing the spittoons.
Uh-huh.
And I believe that like maybe I might be making part of this up. It's based on some truth that I might be misremembering, but that like someone spilled like a hot drink or something on her or like around her, and she's like, "That's it, no more hot drinks." And like these things that were personal, like very personal, just like pet peeves of
Uh-huh.
real people, like human people, became part of this law. So the no loud laughter, it just sounds like an extension of whenever they sat down and they were writing all the rules, someone with a little bit of sway was like, put no loud laughter in there. They're like, why? And it's just like, because. And it just, that's how it works.
That's funny. Yeah, because it's of the devil. It annoys me.
And the thing is, too, that if we were reading this like it were the Dead Sea Scrolls, right? If this were millennia old, if it were 2000 plus years old,
Hmm.
when people were like no loud laughter, you'd get a whole bunch of theologists around like, what does that mean? That's so deep. I bet that means X, Y, and Z. And maybe even like the old rules that don't make sense to us now, it could have been something as mundane as like the person writing it didn't like
Oh,
loud
right.
laughter, or like their husband laughed too loud and they were just annoyed at them and they just snuck it in there.
Maybe they
But
just
but
didn't
the
like
fact it's so
shrimp.
new, it's like it's easier to criticize because it's still fresh.
Yeah, I bet she did put that in there. Um, okay, so the second token is of the Melchizedek priesthood, and it's funny that they're using this because Aaron and Melchizedek wouldn't even have existed at this time.
But again, I think in like the sci-fi occult nature of all this,
Uh-huh.
that Joseph Smith is not doing linear algebra. He's doing like non-linear calculus or something, or at
Hmm.
least the way that he's forming all this together. There exists multiple dimensions. I don't think time necessarily needs to be linear because you do have this before, during, and after, but the after isn't necessarily like in the future. I think that there's like multiple timelines,
Mm.
and it's open to that kind of interpretation because he was so occult and so sci-fi with all of the foundations of this stuff.
Yeah, it's all happened before and it's going to happen again. And at the end of this endowment ceremony that I watched, um, the first password sounds like Eli, and the second password is a name, I guess his own name, Heinrich. And then the Melchizedek priesthood, the password is the sun, I think is what they said. And then the main like thing that they have to recite to get through the curtain into the celestial room. I guess it's on YouTube, I can say it. It's so weird. It goes health in the navel, marrow in the bones, strength in the loins and in the sinews. Power and priesthood be upon me and upon my posterity through all generations of time and throughout all eternity.
I always wondered that, let's say God comes to Earth and you got to give him the secret handshake and you got to give him the secret passage. What if you like flub one of the words? Like you get it mostly right? Is he just like, sorry, good chance, but you
Yeah.
only get one, and then you just, you don't get your planet.
Well, it's funny because it's like that game of telephone, like one person could have got it wrong and then everybody else was screwed after that.
Yeah, and we're totally relying that Joseph Smith translated this perfectly and that every other person that came after him also has translated it perfectly. Although, again, something that makes Mormonism somewhat unique is that it does not have the same struggles with translating between like four or five different languages and some of them
Hmm.
dead and some of
Hmm.
them without punctuation and context. This one essentially existed in a weird hieroglyphic text that only Joseph Smith could read and write, but also in just English essentially.
Hmm. And I did watch an extra endowment just for fun. Now, this one was from 2008 and it had a blonde Eve.
I
So,
regret to let you know you're probably like a double Mormon now. You didn't mean for this to happen, but I think you might actually be more Mormon than you were when it started.
Hey, I put on this dress and Jay loved it. He said how pretty I look. So now, uh-oh, we're gonna get sealed in celestial heaven.
Yeah, worst
Um,
case scenario, you get a planet at the end of all this. I don't know. It seems
right?
like a decent Pascal's wager.
Space babies and I'm a goddess. Okay. So the second endowment movie, this one had a blonde Eve. It was pretty much the same. The gods have created worlds like this before. It had your basic drone footage creation scenes. It had the gods leaving and coming back. Lucifer says Adam is in a new world patterned on the old one where he used to live. He has forgotten.
Well, and I think that this is part of the sequence and like the original concept of your before life, your current life, and your afterlife,
Hmm.
that you don't get to bring your memories between these different stages of life. It's almost, I mean, if you were to go with classic concepts of reincarnation, one of those premises is that unless you're like an ascended master and you've reached nirvana and like it basically transcended above reincarnation, but otherwise reincarnation, even if you get to come back, you don't get to remember anything that you learned in the previous life unless you've got, like some supernatural or occult ability. But I think that that sort of plays out on all three phases. It would, because part of my understanding of the afterlife in Christianity, or at least in Catholicism, is that when you do go to the afterlife, you do remember like your friends and your family, and you have memory, and
Hmm.
it's just like without fault or vice. Like you don't think of like bad things, it's all good things.
Hmm.
But even in Mormonism, there is this idea that you might, if you do come back, or if you go into an afterlife, that you maybe not always get to retain 100% of the information between these different like phase changes.
Mm. Okay, and that makes sense with the Jewish Kabbalistic idea of transmigration of souls too. So that might could have been where he's getting some of that stuff.
I don't know if you've ever if you haven't seen this, I highly recommend it. It's called Saturday's Warrior,
Uh-huh.
and it was a musical. It was a Mormon musical that I think was supposed to be their version of like Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat or something, or like
Uh-huh.
a Christian musical, but it's exclusively Mormon, and they cover this pretty well, where it shows in the pre-life that this couple gets together and like they're in love, and they're like, I can't wait to find you in the next life, which is going to be here on Earth in this life.
Uh-huh.
And it's this big dilemma because it's like, will they find each other out of all the billions of people on the planet? What are the chances that the same two people in the pre-life find themselves in the right life? And it shows how that's an actual dilemma that like a modern Mormon in 1980s is like, not just is he my dream guy, or is this my soulmate? It's like, is this the person that I was in love with in my previous state of being?
Uh-huh.
Which is kind of like a deeper existential dread for, teen love than pretty much any other religion has to go through.
That's like twin flame soulmate,
Yeah, he was the
right?
first. Yeah, Mormons were the first twin flames for sure.
What is it called? Saturday's what?
Saturday's Warrior, and
Warrior. Okay.
there's a remake too, but the classic from I think the 70s or the 80s is the one that you want. There's a
Okay.
whole song about eugenics in there. And it's very like over the top, very black and white over the top, where it's like if you're not Mormon, then you are anti-human and that you're for the downfall of humanity as a whole. And that
Uh-huh.
was part of the Mormons overcompensating of like, we need more babies because the rest of these heathens, the rest of these non-Mormons out here, are basically anti-human, anti-natal.
Hmm. That's so funny because you know that show, the guy who has four wives, he's got like blonde curly hair. I'm blanking on the name of the show. It's a Mormon Sister Wives, I think it's called. Have you ever seen that one?
Maybe, and Pat, an older one, right?
Well, I mean, they do not act like soulmates in love. Like, at one point when I was watching it, this guy had four families, four households, and they all hate him. So it's like, what is the point of having all of these wives and
Well, it sounds like
children?
Brigham Young. Brigham Young
Yeah.
had like I think upwards of like 40 or 50 wives, and each wife had their own house and their own family, and they didn't really interact with each other. And I'm pretty sure that he was not batting 1,000, right? Like Brigham
Yeah.
Young, in terms of satisfying his multiple wives of all these ages.
Yeah, like he would go from house to house and it's just problem after problem. And it's like, you can't keep one woman happy. You're not going to get four women happy. It's
And
funny.
not just that, but there was so much of his life was spent with just the dudes out in the on the frontier. Like it wasn't even with any of his 50 wives. He was still spending all his times with the boys, even though he
Yeah,
had all these wives.
that's so crazy. So, yeah. Oh, Lucifer in this second endowment movie, he looks like Lord Varys from Game of Thrones. He's just like sneaking around, like plotting.
Yeah, they didn't do the same Hollywood version. I mean, because that archetype didn't really exist until the late 1800s, I think, early 1900s of
Uh-huh.
this like Faustian devil. And even then it was just a dude for the longest time. It slowly evolved into this LaVey sort of archetype over like getting into like the 40s and 50s, I believe. Like that was a uniquely American Hollywood creation. And this was
Yeah.
a little bit separate from that.
In this one, Adam was a super good boy. He denied the fruit two times.
Hmm.
Um, and Eve had to literally like manipulate him into doing it because she's like, "Well, I ate it, and God said that we're supposed to populate the earth, but if he kicks me out of the garden and you're here and I'm there, we can't, make babies." And so Adam's like, "Okay." And so he eats the fruit for her sake or for humanity's sake, really. So in this
Which is
version,
also an inversion of masonry because of the three knocks that you get denied the first two times. You have to knock
oh,
the third time in
okay.
order to be accepted. This is
Uh-huh.
just the same thing playing out with the apple.
Oh, I didn't even think about that. Good point. Yeah, so he's taken one for Team Humanity by participating in the fall. And they talk about duality in this version. They talk about everything has his opposite. This is Lucifer. Um, good, bad, light, dark is all the same. So it's very getting Neoplatonic even.
No, or just straight up Masonic still, right?
Yeah.
It's the same premise of the that even though you see this checkerboard floor of white and black, that everything really happens between those squares in this like nebulous shade of gray that you don't actually see.
Mm. And in the end of this one, God comes back and he tells them if Eve submits to Adam, because this is all her fault, and it's up to her to, if she does a good job submitting, then Elohim will send a savior in the future. So if Eve is a good girl, then Jesus will come if she is a submissive trad wife. That's what I got
You
from
you need to have a carrot on the end of the
that.
stick.
Yeah. So what do you
And
think about
there's
those
not a lot of
two?
carrots for women within early Mormonism. And it's funny where we started out this conversation was about this new like TikTok, like boss bitch Mormons that are unrecognizable from earlier for
Yes.
sure. But like this is kind of their moment. Like this is the moment for powerful female Mormons. I mean, even in 30 years ago, it would be unheard of to even be outspoken, let alone have like a whole following and be like a Mormon superstar. And this is just more proof that we're seeing it slowly evolve with the times as more time goes on. Like for example, the Fantasia clip that was in that endowment ceremony we just were talking about, that didn't leave until 1990s. So everyone that went through the endowment ceremony up until the 90s, they also got this big dose of Disney, like part of the most sacred part of your religious experience that you'll ever have in the Mormon church is probably this endowment. You only do it one time, and you're supposed to remember everything that happens, and you're never going to see it again unless you go
Hmm.
on YouTube.
Hmm.
So having it like that closely entwined, like this American cultural thing implanted in this religion, and now it doesn't exist anymore. Now people don't get that Disney dose, and it's just and you can see it evolving in real time.
Well, Mormonism also has this like kind of romantic veneer with the it's not exactly Norman Rockwell, but like the how they paint the relationship between Joseph and Emma, like there's giant portraits of them in love and embracing, and it's also sweet and it's very like capturing Americana moments, like very romanticized ideas of like pioneer life.
But
Um,
the perfect couple. They were
yeah.
twin flames,
Yeah.
and the modern Mormon church, as I understand it, has completely downplayed the role of polygamy across the board in the religion. And I think this was a concession to becoming copacetic with the United States. This was one of the things that the U.S. was like, here's one thing we're not going to budge on. They're like, all right, we'll like slowly phase this thing out. But that the official canon of modern Mormon church, the official company line is that Joseph Smith never had any multiple wives, that it was just him and Emma, ride or die, Bonnie and
Mm.
Clyde.
Hmm. So, yeah, the veneers that they're putting on of normalcy and of just like romantic love. And also, I find it kind of funny that the Mormon women who are getting popular now, they're very, like you said, career minded. And that's not a very trad wife uh thing.
Maybe,
I
maybe. I mean,
so there
there's interpretations of it.
Yeah, I'm not I want them to have whatever they want, but it's like there's messages getting put out that are conflicting. Do you know what I mean? Like, so a trad wife is not supposed to have a job. She's not supposed to have a brand. She's not supposed to have like a bank account or you can get it as restrictive as you want. But these other women are using like the benefits of feminism to sell this trad wife image, if that makes any
Oh
sense.
yeah, yeah, 100. Because like we were describing before, that you're not gonna go and homestead and like be perfectly made up and have followers and have time to record videos and get your lighting right. You need a team to do all that. So
Yeah.
obviously, you're gonna have people falling for this like vision, this veneer that they're putting up, with it being built on top of Mormonism. Although you can make it just as strong of an argument too that it's a net plus for Mormonism, because even though it's all fake, even though it's all like a dog and pony show, it's espousing at the surface level the basic tenets and like being mindful, having a family, close knit, self-reliance, pooling your resources together for community. Like
Hmm.
it's still espousing all of these things. So it's not the same as standing on the shoulders and then just like getting filthy rich off it. Although clearly that's a nice little side bonus. But if you pay attention, the Mormon Church as an entity or egregore, like separate it from
Yeah.
Mormons themselves, but the Mormon Church is incredibly wealthy. It has been it probably got in on whatever came before Bitcoin and we still haven't found out. Like they went in hard, and like they're one of the only religions that are still putting like gold on their temples. Pretty much every other religion's like, look, we love gold, but we don't really have the money for it unless it's going straight to the Vatican.
Yeah.
And a lot of other religious temples tend to be a little bit, I guess, more mundane versus at least where they started at. And in fact, I think recently the Mormon church just put up a temple like right outside the Vatican. So they're like power players. That was kind of an establishment of like, hey, we're right in the places that all your other major world religions are headquartered. We've also got a headquarters there.
Well, a lot of Mormons are now influencing the current presidential cabinet, right? A lot
Yeah,
of
and again, just a reminder that it's 2% of the US population are Mormon.
mm.
So if you feel more than 2% influenced by Mormonism in any facet of your life, it is somewhat out of balance.
They are growing. They're getting more popular. They're getting out there in the social media. There's a worse things that you can be than trying to be wholesome. Do you remember that
Agreed?
South Park show, Book of Mormon?
You mean well, so there was the
The
play, and then they
musical.
also
Yeah.
had the Cannibal the Musical, which came before South Park, that was based on Mormons.
Oh, really? Is
Yeah, that like before South Park came along, I believe that um the two creators they made a few different sort of like student films, and one of them was called Cannibal the Musical, and it
Uh-huh.
basically was like a Donner Party, but not. It was like the B version of Donner Party.
Oh, okay. I always enjoyed just their lampooning of the silly parts of these stories, and I did see Book of Mormon on Broadway, so that was really fun.
And my understanding is the Mormons find it hard to be critical of Book of Mormon because it doesn't necessarily lie or make anything up that's not true.
Right.
It does it in like a funny way that maybe Mormon elders in the church are going to tell you don't go and see that thing, it's bad. But if you just
Mhm.
went and saw it, I don't think there's anything overtly offensive or inflammatory or even like wrong in any of it.
If I remember, it was Mormons against FGM in Africa. Like, do Mormon missionaries go to some place in where they do female genital mutilation, and they were trying to
Yeah.
fight against
Yeah,
that?
that was part of it. And the
Yeah.
other large premise of Book of Mormon is that once he gets there, once the guy actually goes to whatever country it was in Africa, that he doesn't really know the Book of Mormon very well, and people start asking him questions, and he knows Star Wars better than he knows the Book of Mormon, so he starts responding to people's like really deep questions, and he's kind of slipping in like George Lucas and Star Wars stuff, which again is kind of
It's
interesting
sci-fi.
because we wouldn't get Star Wars without Mormons. In
Exactly.
fact, we don't even get 3D animation without Mormons because there was a guy named Ed Catmull that basically created a large portion of what we know now as CGI. He worked at Lucasfilms, a lot of his technology, and he went to work directly at Pixar under John Lasseter because John Lasseter knew him previously, and he's I believe there's like Catmull formulas that are based on like 3D shading and stuff. But
Mhm.
again, like this, they were not just these bumpkins that just came from Salt Lake City and nowhere else. Like they were already putting all this out there. So when I was watching Book of Mormon, I thought it was funny because the premise is like, oh, this guy's just making it up and he's deriving all of these things from non-Mormon sources. But like deep down, Star Wars is also Mormon, just like
Hmm.
Battlestar Galactica is also Mormon.
Hmm. And definitely the idea of the Force you can find in classical magic too.
And the Melchizedek chest plate, I believe, that the original Darth Vader wore in the very original films is like a one for one. It's like these old magical
Oh, uh-huh.
talismans. There's like a direct connection to that again. Although that's not as much a Mormon connection as it is like a Talmudic connection or something.
Right. Well, speaking of magic, the last thing I wanted to talk about with you tonight is called The Beast and the Prophet. Aleister Crowley's fascination with Joseph Smith. Now he starts off talking about like what is the difference between magic revelation and a religion, and in my opinion, it was just like the size of it, really. But he says one of the best available definitions of the magical revelation was proposed by William Butler Yeats. And according to Yeats, the main features of the magical vision of a revelation are one, that the borders of our mind are ever shifting, and that many minds can flow into one another, as it were, and create or reveal a single mind, a single energy.
This makes me think of like Gustave Le Bon's The Crowd in a like a secular version of this, that if you get 50 people together in a crowd, that their mentality forms a new super organism that is no longer just the 50 of them combined. It's a new thing.
Hmm. And so, yeah, my note on here says hive mind singularity, because the second point he says that the borders of our memories are ever shifting, and that our memories are part of one great memory, the memory of nature herself. And number three, that this great mind and great memory can be evoked by symbols.
This
So,
is also very Rosicrucian
mhm,
because in Rosicrucianism, again, grossly oversimplifying it, but there's this premise that even consciousness itself is part of this evolutionary pattern that before you get this individual human consciousness, that before that there's like an animal consciousness, and that an animal consciousness is like a pack of dogs that no individual dog in a pack actually has a concept of being an individual and therefore doesn't have its own individual consciousness. It
Hmm.
only exists as a pack mentality, just like flocks of birds exist as like a consciousness shared among a bunch of different units inside of a group. So this
Or
is just another Rosicrucian retelling branded in Mormonism.
or ants or bees for that matter. So here's
And bees were another very strong symbol in Mormonism and in Freemasonry because
here
it
yeah.
refers to like the industrious nature.
Here's the woodcut with the beehive. And this is in the Kabbalah paper, which is in the member section, but bees over here are very important to Mormons and the state of Utah. Oh, here is a Hermes Trismegistus. See that? Pretty basic alchemical symbol right there.
He always looked like a globetrotter to me, like spinning the ball on his finger.
Yeah. If you look up pictures of the temple in Nauvoo, they've got alchemical. Let me look it up real quick. Sorry, I don't have it pulled up already. Nauvoo.
And I believe they also have pentagrams in the stained
Yes.
glass windows that people usually bring up constantly. Although the pentagram too, I believe the Christian use of the pentagram even predates like Eliphas Levi and Aleister Crowley, who then like he basically claimed that you could invert it and didn't make it bad. I believe that Eliphas Levi, he's the one that said inverting the pentagram makes it evil, but you can find much earlier versions because it used to represent the 5 points.
Mhm.
I can't remember all the different details in this, but there is historical biblical references to pentagrams.
Here is the temple in Nauvoo. You see those guys? The suns?
The suns, and if you notice too, they're like partially obscured, right?
Yeah.
So it even implies occultism, just that the sun is partially obscured.
So how close is that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, where were we? This is the other paper, the Kabbalah paper.
And again, anyone that's deep into like Tartarian um theories or like the old world theories about no one makes these old world intricate buildings anymore. Well,
Mhm.
Mormons do. Mormon, or at least they were up to a pretty recent point.
Yeah, I've always thought that, driving by one of those super giant Mormon temples, they look like a space castle. They look very, right?
I mean, that's kind of the vibe that
Yeah,
they've always been
definitely the
going
vibe.
for.
Okay, so the hive mind, the beehive is very important. What else is on this paper that I want to talk about? Passage about Joseph Smith.
And this is the one that basically says that Crowley was a huge fan of Joseph Smith's writing and
Yes.
that he saw him as like a magical guru.
Yeah, a recipient of magical revelations, just like Iwas or somebody like that.
Like an ascended master kind
Hmm.
of if you were to be a little bit more like 1920s with it.
Yeah. Okay. So here, forgive me, I'm going to read this. It's kind of long, but bear with me. There are two main passages in which Aleister Crowley clearly states his feelings about Joseph Smith. The first passage is included in Crowley's autobiography, where he explains that we should found society upon a caste of men of the earth, sons of the soil, sturdy, sensual, stubborn, and stupid, not emasculated by ethical or intellectual education, but guided in their evolution by the intelligent governing classes towards an ideal of pure animal perfection. So there's the Liber Oz idea, right? The slaves shall serve, the very stratified magicians class and the servant class. What do you think about that?
It just sort of falls along with any other ancient mystery school, which Mormonism is following that exact same template.
The profane and the right
You're
initiate.
3 degrees in masonry, but that like the exact same principle. And then you've got like your Cowans or non-Mormons.
Hmm. It says this idea, Crowley claims, is not racist, since in such a substratum variation will produce sporadic individuals of higher type, And in fact, history affords innumerable examples of the lofty intelligence and the noblest characters shooting up from the grossest stock. Men of the highest genius came from peasant parentage, and few indeed of the first class have been born of intellectually developed families. Among these men of the highest genius, Crowley mentions French sculptor Rodin, Keats, Lincoln, Carlyle, Whitman, German philosopher Boehm, and Joseph Smith. So he is in this class of like superior beings that came from
Like
humble
humble
origin.
origins.
Yeah.
He he conveniently leaves out Rene Descartes, who kind of defines modern thinking as a whole, because Rene Descartes was totally a trust fund kid, just like Aleister Crowley was a
Oh,
trust
yeah.
fund kid, right? It's as he's writing that, I really do wonder if any of that is tongue in cheek, where he's just kind of like flagellating himself. Like this is like a self-humiliation ritual. Like you're never gonna be any good because you didn't come from humble roots.
Right. He probably, yeah. He says it is somewhat surprising that some Americans are included because Crowley, at this point in his autobiography, had just explained that an adult American is a rare thing. However, Crowley explains, on the other hand, that genius is always constitutionally robust and physical strength is not a bar to be a genius, as Joseph Smith, among others, had proved. So I guess he wasn't very
Yeah,
chat.
well, growing up, I believe for the first like 14 years of his life or something, Joseph Smith was sort of treated as like an invalid.
Mm,
That he had some kind of issue that either he shed or was able to conceal much better towards the end of his life. And when I say end of his life, I mean he died in like his like late 20s or 30s or something. So
uh-huh. Yeah, and right before he died, he gave that like distress signal right out the window.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. He gave the hailing of the widow's son, I believe, that
Didn't
was
work.
supposed to like save him by the Masons, but yeah.
Hmm. And then, so the second place that Aleister Crowley talks about Joseph Smith is actually in the book Moonchild, where he's talking about in chapter 16, there's a character where it says she watches the stars and has a vision of a number of great souls, Maximilian, General Boulanger, Ludwig, Chopin, Byron, blah, blah, Tchaikovsky, Kipling, um, and other figures. And then Joseph Smith is one of these guys again. It says, all gave way to a most enigmatic figure. It was an insignificant face and form, but the attributions of him filled all heaven. Now she's talking about Joseph Smith. In Moonchild, did you know about this?
Yeah, I've had to read Moonshot a few times over the last couple of years. It's To be fair, he's not the greatest novelist. It's not the
Oh,
funnest
yeah.
book to read. It's very autobiographical. He kind of beats you over the head on some of it.
He,
But yeah, again, I always wonder too that it doesn't seem that the Mormon Church would be receptive to praise by Aleister Crowley.
uh-huh.
They'd probably be like, no, 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 he's not talking about our Joseph Smith. He's talking about some other Joseph Smith.
Right.
But clearly he is.
He says, there was a vision of an immense muddy river rushing through swamps, and then she saw that from this man's brain issued phantoms like pigeons. They were neither Red Indians or Israelites, yet they had something of each in their bearing. These poured like smoke from the head of this little man. In his hand was a book, and he held it over his head, and the book itself was guarded by an angelic figure whose face was extraordinarily stern and unbeautiful, but who scattered with wide hands the wealth of life, children, and corn and gold. And behind all these things was a great multitude, and about them were the symbolic forms of exile and death and every persecution. So that's kind of like the tale of them going out west, right?
Yeah, and this interestingly enough too, the Moonchild, part of that premise of like the Moonchild ritual was creating this perfect vessel to attract these spirits.
Yeah.
And those spirits are usually, especially according to Crowley, would roam the desert and roam like the plains more so than like mountainous regions and populated regions. So the place where the Mormons are going is actually the best place historically to actually have moon children and to have a whole bunch of different vessels out in the middle of this new expanse. that I guess in Crowley's mind, I don't think he ever wrote this much, but what Joseph Smith was doing was just creating hundreds of thousands collectively of moonchild vessels.
Yes. I mean, spot on, perfect. That's exactly what they're saying. Uh, Ritual sex to produce superior babies, that can, so your posterity can go into space. And this is what Crowley was doing, at Cefalu. How do you pronounce that?
At where?
In Italy, when he was in his
I'm
Abbey of
blanking.
Colima and in Sicily. He wanted to become the world center of a new religion of Christianity, just like Joseph Smith had created Mormonism. He was also trying to have lots of babies. He became entangled with a number of love affairs. He lived at the Abbey with Leah Hersey, Rose Kelly. Uh,
Although he had better drugs than Joseph Smith.
right. There's the lady Ninette. Um, anyway,
Don't
so
forget Pauline Pierce, Barbara Bush's mom.
right? Allegedly.
Yeah.
Um, It says people in Sicily called Crowley the Mormon and the Abbey's group the Mormon community, apparently because Crowley, having more than one wife, was easily confused with old popular literature about Mormon polygamists.
And so here's another interesting angle on this. And I don't think that there's like a grand design or conspiracy that made it this way, but here
Mhm.
the reality of it is that there's so many things about Mormonism that are far more salacious and weird than polygamy. Polygamy is something that can exist in or outside of Mormonism. It happens to be a core tenet of the early version of it, but it also feels like the perfect smokescreen because historically ever like even if you go back at the very the founding of the Mormon religion, that's what everyone laser focused on, the Mormons and the polygamy and the multiple wives, and none of the other stuff, none of the endowment ceremony stuff, none of
Oh,
the
yeah.
collectivist stuff, none of the secret handshakes and masonry and talismans and all the magic. It's always like the polygamy and the multiple wives. And what a perfect smokescreen if you want to do other like weird occult things,
Hmm.
because you've got this one very prominent, very superficial and obvious thing that everyone can criticize constantly,
Hmm.
and I don't know, it serves as like a great little smokescreen.
Totally. That's a good point. Um, yeah, so this paper is going on to say most channeled new gospels, including A Course in Miracles, fall within the category of magical revelations. There is a great universal mind. Seen in Gnostic and pantheistic terms, we all fell from the divine unity, and in the Course of Miracles, we are all part of the dream or nightmare of the Son of God. And what the channel Gospels offer us is a way to return to this unity, reaching at the same time our inner self.
So heavy
Yeah.
Gnosticism and Rosicrucianism baked into that again,
Yeah.
which wouldn't be surprising because Crowley, and it's funny too, Crowley is like, there's no adults in America, like says the guy that's like getting people lost on K2 and doing like mescaline fueled orgies and literally getting kicked out of every single society or group that he ever joins to the point where he's like, well, screw it, I'll just make my own. And then he kind of like gets kicked out of his own thing too in a certain
Yeah.
way. So like,
Like,
yeah.
who is he to judge, right?
Yeah, I don't care what Aleister Crowley says about my religion. What does that guy know?
Well, this paper is making another connection between that and flying saucer cults. So the revelations of like I've been abducted or I'm a Pleiadian or I'm from Sirius, like lots of these crackpots can be rolled up into these, burrito of revelations. And they even talk about what is this? A Festinger syndrome, which explains why prophetic failure is normally not fatal to religious groups. Oh, okay. So he's talking about why, if a religious group says the rapture is going to happen and it doesn't happen, why don't they just crumble at that moment?
The
right?
Mormons are another great example of this
Yeah.
because the early Mormons, this is one of the most fascinating parts of the early Mormon religion is that they were not vague about when the end times were coming. And in fact, it wasn't even like sometime in our lifetimes. Some of the early Mormon groups were like, it's gonna be October. Like the end of the world is happening this year. It's in 2 months. You better start pooling all your resources and getting ready for this thing. And then when it didn't happen, it was like, oh, we meant next October. Or actually it's in like 2 Octobers from now, but it's gonna be super soon. And every time that would come to pass, then some of these claims would get pushed farther and farther into the future to the point now where it is nebulous and vague.
Hmm.
But you can, I mean, you can go back and just read the official Mormon writings of these early like church pioneers, and they're literally talking about like in 1795, this is it. This is going to be the end of everything. This is kind of how like the Branch Davidians started, is that they became a doomsday cult, and then when it didn't come to pass, I think in like the early 1900s, then they just kind of like fizzled out a little bit. But for whatever reason, the Mormons never fizzled out because I think that they were almost too big to fail at that point. They were
Mm.
literally like a good portion of this country was just like Mormon country,
And Jehovah's Witness too are famous for that. The
which has
doomsday
another Skull
date.
and Bones connection, by the way. Both
Oh, cool.
Mormonism and Jehovah's Witness both share Skull and Bones in common.
Oh, okay.
Because William Huntington Russell was basically help found like the Watchtower organization
Uh-huh.
within Jehovah's Witnesses, and then we mentioned earlier that there's a branch of Skull and Bones from Yale that also involved one of the leaders from I want to say like the 50s or the 60s, and he was part of this revamping of the Mormon image of like we can't be space pirates anymore. We got to be clean cut, Mormons on bikes.
Oh, I forgot about that. They're always in a white shirt with black pants on bikes. That's how you recognize them. That's
And,
funny.
and and it's so smart. It's so smart because it's projecting this very wholesome, inoffensive, approachable image
Hmm.
that completely sort of like sideswipes all of the other Mormon baggage that people would have ascribed to them prior to the 1950s.
Do you remember that movie that just came out with Hugh Grant where he was the creeper that captured?
Heretic, yeah.
Yes. Those girls were Mormons, weren't they? Or archetypal?
Yeah, the two girls that were Mormons, although one of them was like pretty well versed in occultism and like esoteric teachings, because she was
Uh-huh.
like staying on the level with him as he's dropping all this information about like old Babylonian gods.
Uh-huh.
So that doesn't sound like a typical Mormon to me. Usually that's on the path to being like a Mormon by name only to
Uh-huh.
keep up appearances.
Right. There was that old conspiracy guy, what was his name? Bill Schneebelen. Do you remember that guy who was like, I'm an ex-Mormon, ex-Satanist, ex-vampire, ex what?
Ex-Illuminati, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He had a lot to say about Mormons too. That's a classic Bible prophecy club. Do you remember that old conspiracy?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
this is where I think like Ted Gunderson came and did some talks, and Fritz
Yeah,
Springmeier might have even done some talks on that.
totally. Funny.
And this is another interesting intersection too, because with like depending on your flavor of Christianity, if you are a fervent Christian of some other kind, there's lots of places where Mormonism seems completely incompatible with any other version of Christianity, and that it's like it's its own thing, that it's not even necessarily a denomination. And then
Hmm.
you've also got Masons that are like anti-Mormon because it to them it feels like a plagiarized version and an expose like an expose and that it introduced like women into masonry, which is still a no-no in American masonry. But then you also have the exact opposite in both those cases. You've got some Christians that are like, yeah, Mormons are just this other flavor, but they're living like Christ-like sort of paths, regardless of where it all started from. And then
Hmm.
you also have Masons that are like, oh no, Mormons are just a newer, improved version of American Freemasonry taken to like again sci-fi and pirates and cowboys.
Yeah. Man, so finally, this paper talks about you're not gonna guess who they're connecting to Joseph Smith, the Raelians.
I could maybe see that because if we're talking about science fiction based religions in chronological order, that's where my mind would go. It would go Mormonism first, Scientology second, Raelians third. Although Raelians, they're kind of as like the party guys, right? I would assume that you could probably light up a joint in a Raelian church. I don't know if that's true,
Hey, they were
but
in Playboy, remember?
yeah, well, the same is not true for the Mormon church.
Right. Well, so Rael, he's saying that he was taught this atheist religion by extraterrestrial beings grounded in belief that space brothers, which is Lucifer, what he called himself in the endowment ceremony, right?
A space brother.
Mm-hmm. And not God have created humanity. These extraterrestrials were in turn created by other extraterrestrials and so on, without end, without God. Men and women created by extraterrestrial scientists endowed with advanced technology. So this is the story of Ra-El's Elohim, his version of Space Brothers, right? So he says he,
And they're also the group that made the first, allegedly made the first human clone, and they called
hmm?
it Eve, which
Yes,
is another connection that ties all that together.
dude, he stood before Congress in his puffy silver spacesuit with the giant V on it, telling them that we have this first
Right,
clone.
clonade, right?
Clonate, yeah. So he says on the Elohim's planet, he went there in 1975 and discovered that it was a very pleasant place where the recreated humans have learnt to manufacture through marvelous machines special biological robots in the shape of beautiful men and women who are ready to comply with any possible sexual wish. Uh,
This just sounds like China.
including, including homosexuality is admitted by Raelian ethics. Rael himself also profited from the machines without moderation, and for one night he had not less than six beautiful female companions. So this is like babe heaven again. Like,
Like Keith Raniere and Nexium was kind of like the dark version of this.
yes. Um, so this is like and it's funny when you look into the Islamic paradise, the women are like, I think they're called Hori, like Whori, and they're gigantic hairless beings that have like translucent skin, and just the way that it's described in the Quran is very space being, and apparently you're just up there and you always have an erection all like 24/7 and you never get tired, and you have all these like space alien babes to have fun with.
So it was like the 70s.
Yeah, exactly. So let's see. It says
That
although
also sounds a little bit congruent with like the Watchers and like the Book of Enoch and Genesis 6 and all that.
mhm.
Especially if you get into like the Gary Wayne Genesis prophecy angle, where the original offspring of the Watchers became these Nephilim, and then all of the major civilizations in history, basically they had to send their men to go and find one of these giant Nephilim women, which were the only ones capable of birthing a giant Nephilim man or leader, like an old giant, and
Uh-huh.
that's how you would like form a new country or a new civilization. You'd have to go and find yourself like an Amazonian, essentially, an Amazonian Nephilim,
Well, you gotta find your giant twin flame,
right?
right? Your Gilgamesh soulmate.
That's what Hillary Clinton was looking for all along.
Oh,
That's why she needed
totally.
the Tomb of Gilgamesh. She was trying to find her twin flame.
Bill was not hacking it, so she needed that like Gilgamesh lovin'. So in this it says Ra-El is of interest not because of his erotic space adventures, but because he met the prophets of old who have been recreated on Elohim's planet and who now enjoy the good life of the planet. Although Jesus and Muhammad are noted, Rael also mentions that Joseph Smith was among them.
So, I mean, I think this is proof that he is an ascended master. Like he's made it to the top of El Sur or wherever they go when they meet the ascended masters these days.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what else we could say about Mormon and magic, except for it says Mormon revelation is a typical religious revelation, while magical revelations and scriptures like Crowley's The Book of the Law um come from these experiences. So
Well, I got something to say about Mormons and magic that I think
Okay.
is worth saying, and that's that one of the crimes, one of the horrible parts of Mormonism, as I understand it, is they've got all this cool magic and space, pirate, cowboy stuff going on, talismans, secret handshakes. But for the most part, your average Mormon outside of the endowment ceremony, which they might just go in and it might just be so surreal and
Hmm.
such a weird experience that it doesn't even lodge the same way, but they've got all of this magic and science fiction, and for the most part, a lot of them don't even realize it. They don't even, and the church itself is doing the opposite. They're trying to be less magic, even though like they are magic AF. It's like one of the most occult, esoteric magic religions that you could join right now, outside of like OTO or Golden Dawn or something, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But it's crazy, and I sometimes I'll joke with Heidi when we're talking about this because like her ex-Mormon perspective is like this is horrible. They're pushing this like demonic magic on people that otherwise think that they're Christian or otherwise.
Hmm.
And I kind of joke, well, it's like, well, the magic parts what is attracting me to Mormonism. Like if they just leaned all the way in and they're
Uh-huh.
like, hey, come to our church, we'll teach you how to do magic and secret handshakes and how to get your own planet, like all the cool stuff they've been suppressing for the last 200 years. And there has to be a pendulum swing moment in the future. I mean, I'm not going to make a prophecy my own, but at some point in the future, they're going to have to go full swing back to all magic. And they're going to have to be like, oh, by the way, yeah, we do talismans. Oh, by the way, the magic underpants are magic because of the talismans that are touching your skin. And here's
Hmm.
the original roots of everything. So, like that, like right now, we're in the ultra conservative, like hide the rest of the public from these magic source origins,
Hmm.
but there's no way that that can last forever.
Well, even in that Mormon Wives, they showed her putting on the white garments, and she was like, "The symbols are on my nipples." Like,
That's the
oh,
point.
yeah, okay. Kinky. So Joseph Smith had a lot of kinks and he had a lot of friends with a lot of books. He was a master tall tale teller. Like we said, a big fish. And if you want more information, you can go to Paranoid Americans channel. Can you tell us?
Yeah, well, so I've got the monthly Mormon Monday show that I do with Heidi Love. We do it once a month. It's not always on
Uh,
Mondays. It's not on like a Tuesday or Wednesday. It's a live show and open to pro Mormons, anti Mormons, current Mormons, ex Mormons, Mormons of all kind are welcome. And we always have a different guest coming on, talking about a different topic. So it's again, I think it's one of the most fascinating parts of American history.
hmm,
And it's a little bit criminal that more people are not more interested in like a core DNA component of our country and American culture. Like we don't get current American culture without Mormons. We don't even get Disney without Mormons.
hmm. Good point. And me and Thomas regularly do Disney movie deep dives on his channel. So can you tell me what is next up for maybe when I can join you again? What movies are we gonna do?
Actually, I do have a list of all the different upcoming one. Maybe we can just talk about it now. Let's see which ones
Okay.
jump out at you. So we just finished doing Planes and Frozen. So the next one's up. Here's the next like five or six.
Okay.
Big Hero 6,
Uh-huh.
Strange Magic, which
Uh-huh.
I'm not even familiar with that name.
I never heard of that one.
Inside Out,
Uh-huh.
The Good Dinosaur,
Uh-huh.
Zootopia, Finding Dory, and Moana. Those are the next big ones coming up.
All right. Let me think on that because I haven't seen any of those. So that would be
We're getting to the period too that I haven't seen a lot of these either. I
uh,
left Disney around 2016 when I worked there for like 10 years, but even when I was working there, I wasn't necessarily watching Disney movies. The only one that I saw while I was there was I think Monsters University, which was 2012. But all the new ones that came out from 2012 on, I don't think I've ever even seen them once.
right. Yeah, I've seen Frozen. That's pretty much the only one that you said that I haven't. So, and look for an article that I just wrote for Decoding Culture Foundation about Pinocchio. It came
Oh,
out.
fun. One of the
Yeah,
the only non-grim fairy tales that made it into the early Disney movies, which I believe was Pinocchio was originally an Italian political comic strip or short stories that was literally about children being trafficked and forced into like indentured servitude.
yeah.
And then it just eventually became like a children's story, but it was real.
Yeah, sitting down to watch Pinocchio, I thought, oh, I know enough to just make a little short little, show out of this. And I had to pause it because I was like, do I have mental problems or is this every esoteric symbol? I'm like, this is Masonic, this is Kabbalistic, this is Gnostic, this is it's got, MK Ultra in there. So
You've also got like ancient Greek occultism from the Golden Ass of Apollonius, I believe. It's
yep,
all yeah, it's all there.
exactly.
Rosicrucianism. You've
Yeah.
got the essentially Pinocchio represents mundane materia from the physical world, and then
Yes.
it gets imbibed by human ingenuity, like it gets human consciousness, and the whole entire premise of Pinocchio is that the human body, like the flesh makes absolutely no difference. That the only thing that really matters is the human intellect. And you could put human intellect in a piece of wood and it would
Mm,
still be the same quality and quantity of human intellect than if you gave it like a flesh bag, which is sort of an interesting, very
hmm.
Rosicrucian angle, I think.
Also, switching consciousnesses into different vessels, that's very Battlestar Galactica sci-fi also.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah. All right, well, we could do this all night, but it's time to go. And this was a great show, one of my favorites, so awesome. We're gonna be seeing more of Mormons probably because of what just happened, the tragedy in Utah. Um, and look out for Thomas at Paranoid American, and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much.